Hey guys, my name is Arcane Static. Welcome back to another episode of Deity Salad. Sorry, it's later than usual, I know. I was in the middle of recording it last Saturday, but then a dude knocked on my door and asked if he could come in for a second, and then I don't really remember what happened very much after that. But I've been kind of under the weather ever since, I've been sleeping weird, my whole sleep schedule's just gone completely borked. I've been just kind of thirsty a lot, I'm not getting enough hydration. I'm getting more affected by sunburns than I normally do, so I've been kind of trying to stay out of that as well. It sounds like it kind of feels like mono or something like that. I don't know, I probably just got a cold. Anyway, let's talk about vampires. So the vampires that we know and love in popular media today are kind of a new thing. They're this sort of special subsection of the Revenant, which we talked about before in the previous Deity Salad video, which is the corpse of a human either returning from the dead or never having quite been dead but changed into the undead while still alive. That's sort of how vampires work. They retain their human intellect for the most part, and they supplement their diet, which is to say that their diet consists primarily of blood of the living. We'll get to this vampire in a minute. I want to go back a little bit first, before that. Let's talk about the Junkie. Junkie? Yeah, it's the sort of like Chinese psychic energy zombie vampire hopping ghost kind of thing. Surely you've seen them. They always wear the clothing from at least 2 generations before where we are right now. They've got the kind of like purplish bluish face and the talisman hanging on their head. That's the Junkie. They are technically revenants as well, though these are kind of different in their origin. A corpse can become a Junkie if, for instance, it sits in its coffin for too long after a funeral is held and a pregnant cat jumps over its coffin, which is very specific, or if it absorbs enough negative yang chi energy to reanimate, or if a spirit possesses that body. Oh, I'm really under the weather, you guys. I'm really sorry. But it eats the chi of the living in order to maintain its own animation, and will often behave like an animal on account of its kind of having lost most of its intelligence in the reanimation process. There is a list of stuff that can repel or get rid of them, which is pretty constant with the idea that vampires can only be gotten rid of in specific means. Here are a couple of them. You can show them a mirror. They're apparently deathly terrified of their own reflection. You can hit them with a stick or some other object that is made from a peach tree. You can hit them with a broom. Apparently brooms screw with them. You can smear the blood of a black dog on them. If you get black dog blood on them somehow, it screws with them. You can spill a bunch of coins on the ground, because then they'll have to stop and count the coins. Or you can stick a hunk of glutinous rice, like mochi, on them, and they'll freak out and run away. There's a ton of other things that can make them go away from you, but their main vampiric trait is the fact that they draw the chi, the life force, from their victims, and then someone who's been attacked by a Junkie could very well become a Junkie themselves. So that's an instance of something that's very, long way in the past for mythology from before we have the sort of, European Western idea of the vampire that we've got now. But what about something from Norway, for instance? Oh, that's easy. We've got the Draugr. Draugr? I'm not really sure how to pronounce it because I don't speak any Norwegian area languages, but they're also reanimated corpses with magic powers that can change their size at will, change shape, drive people insane, and phase shift through solid objects. They kill their victims, generally super violently, and drink their blood. They can invade people's dreams, they leave curses and diseases on villages, and they generally just cause a lot of damage to the places and people that they come across. They are animated by intense, like, hatred or greed, and they have appetites that absolutely cannot be sated. Just pretty much bad news all around. And in order to kill one, you had to either let it decay and fall apart eventually, because they will do that by themselves. You can literally wrestle it, like physically grab it and wrestle it back to its grave. You pretty much have to be some sort of, like, folk hero. This is like a requirement. If you're a normal person, it doesn't work. You have to be a hero. And then you have to cut off its head, burn the body, and dump the ashes into the ocean. They're vampiric not only in the like, blood drinking and killing by unconventional means aspects, but also by virtue of their, like, jealousy of the living. Because one of the things that characterizes them is their deep jealousy of those who are still alive and can experience and appreciate and enjoy the things that alive people can, like eating normal food, having sex with people, hanging out in the sun, that kind of stuff, because they too were once alive and had friends and family and can enjoy nice things, and now they no longer can, so they're pissed off at the living because of their continued ability to have those things. Native Americans have a bunch of pretty cool vampire-like monsters in their mythology as well. One of them, which is called the Skidagamuch, which I would have never been able to pronounce if I hadn't looked it up, is like a type of undead ghost witch sort of thing. Essentially, they're like, you have an evil sorcerer, and once that evil sorcerer dies, they aren't content to stay dead, and the residual, like, evil magic that's been built up in their body allows them to rise from their grave at night and hunt humans. They eat the living, have magic powers, and tend to leave curses on anyone who sees them and isn't eaten in the process. You can actually kill these ones relatively easily, kind of breaking from the vampire tradition, all things considered, by lighting them on fire, but the hard part is getting close enough to them to do so without being cursed, killed, or eaten. There's just far too many examples of the vampire-type creature to list in this video, but that brings us to the ones that we know about today, the sort of Western vampire. While accounts vary on time period, location, and amount of embellishment involved by the teller of the story, we know that historically, the European vampire mania broke out in about the 1720s and 30s, where an alleged outbreak of vampire attacks in Prussia started a huge streak of reports of similar attacks happening pretty much everywhere in Europe. The first officially recorded vampire attack from this period was that of Peter Blagojevich from Kisilova, Serbia, who, after having died at the ripe old age of 62 years old, apparently came back to see his family to ask for stuff. According to one account, he asked his wife for his shoes, who then got up and left the town and moved to another town completely in order to look safe. But then in another account, he came back and asked his son for food, and then when his son denied him because he said, "You're supposed to be fucking dead," he murdered the shit out of him and drank his blood. And that's fun. But during the 8 days after his death, 9 people in the village also met their end after suffering some short malady or another. All of them, however, claimed that Peter had come to them in the night and tortured them in one way or another, often by strangling them. And so the village lost its collective shit and immediately decided to exhume the corpse and see what the fuck was up. They demanded that the closest imperial provisor and the local priest come with them, and the closest provisor was a man named Frombald, who suggested it was probably, like, not actually okay to disinter a body without permission from higher up in authority in, like, the Prussian government. But the villagers responded with what I can only assume sounded like something, okay, sure, you go, and go back to the main Prussia area and ask for permission and do all the paperwork and talk to all the people, and we'll just wait here and get eaten by the fucking vampire. Does that sound good to you? No, get your shit together and come with us. So he pretty much had to go along with it. And so he was, like, writing the official account of all of this, and at the end of it, he was like, please don't hold me responsible for any of the stuff that happened during this time, because the villagers were completely insane, and they would not let me not come with them. But anyway, so they went down to the graveyard and they dug up the body, and in the actual real official report from Frombald, which we have today, it says that the corpse, despite being 9 or 10 days dead, had not started to decay, it had grown more beard and hair and fingernails, and it had what looked to be fresh blood in its mouth. So the people who saw this were like, no, fuck that, he's definitely coming out and, like, fucking with things. So they jammed a wooden stake in its chest, like through the heart, and then from its ears and mouth, a bunch of what appeared to be fresh blood just issued, like far more than was necessary for it to have, which goes right back to that same thing that we had in the bits when we were talking about the revenants in the previous video. After they burned the body, draining it from all of the blood that was inside of it, the weird deaths seemed to have stopped thereafter. So who knows, maybe it did work. Now, of course, as we discussed before, the amount of blood that poured out of it and the fact that it had, like, more beard and nails and stuff is actually part of normal decomposition. But normal composition or not, regardless of its actual vampireness or not, this case, which was translated and published all over Europe thereafter, was one of the catalysts that made the belief in vampires that we have now sort of start to take shape. If you want to read about more cases like this one, you can look up into Arnold Paule, from around the same time as this one, and you can also look into Mercy Brown in 1892. Both of them are pretty rad cases, and you can, like, see where the whole superstition has come together, and they had to exhume bodies and perform rituals and stab them in the heart and that kind of stuff. The historical recording of, like, vampirism as they were taking place is just positively fascinating. So what do we get from all of the hype and superstition of before nowadays? Well, we've got the modern vampire myth, which is based off of just tons and tons of popular literature and superstition and stuff all coming together. So here are some of the things that we can largely agree upon regarding vampires. Now, some of these will vary from source to source, but this is stuff that we can generally say are qualities of the modern Western vampire. They have fangs, which may or may not disappear or grow longer or whatever when being used, and they're either the incisors here or the canines out here, which is fine. They tend to not have reflections in mirrors or other reflective surfaces, depending, but they might show up on film or digital cameras. They are either hideous-looking abominations or just eerily really attractive, but never like normal-looking people. They have an aversion to, and sometimes fatal weakness to, sunlight, where if they go out into sunlight, or in some cases it takes it even far enough to just be like any kind of UV light at all, in the case of like Blade and that kind of stuff, any of that kind of gives them nausea and or turns them into dust. They have an aversion to holy relics of the Christian faith, unless they were around before the Christian faith developed, at which point they don't care. Running water, like a body of running water, so a stream or a river or something like that, will often immobilize them, and they tend to not be able to travel over it or across it unless they're in a coffin full of the earth surrounding their own grave. Cutting off their head is often fatal, or at least one of the steps to killing it. Most of the time they can't enter a building owned by a person without invitation by a person inside that building. It doesn't have to be the person who owns the building, but they do have to be inside the building in order to be able to invite the vampire inside. They generally are taken care of by a stake through the heart, but sometimes it must be made of like a specific type of wood or a specific type of iron. A metal or wood spike tends to do the trick. They are generally immortal unless killed, or unless, depending on the source, they go without blood for long enough that they shrivel up and go into a sort of disanimated state. They tend to have some kind of like magical or otherwise supernatural powers, not limited to enhanced strength, speed, healing factor, and senses. They tend to be able to change their shape into at least one other form, often including bats, clouds of mist, wolves, giant dogs, terrifying other humanoid creatures, that kind of thing. They tend to be able to influence the minds of people around them, either by hypnosis or suggestion or telepathy or just being really sexy. They tend to be able to change the living into vampires via their bite, which may or may not always be the case. Sometimes it requires them to drain the entire body of blood and then like spit their own vampire blood into the mouth of their victim. Sometimes it depends on whether or not they're a virgin that they'll be turned into a vampire or not. Sometimes they'll be turned into a sort of like vampire's familiar or thrall just by being bitten, but they have to choose to turn them into a vampire later on, that kind of thing. They tend to not be able to get pregnant or get others pregnant, which I suppose is nice if you are the lover of a vampire and he decides he's not going to drain you of blood. Shrug. And their main diet is human blood. Sometimes they can get by with drinking animal blood or artificial blood, so long as there's like the hemoglobin and that kind of stuff in it, but it tends to just be, it has to be human blood. So thanks to the mutation, melting together, embellishment, and growth of the superstitions of old, we now have modern vampire lore for the West, thanks to people like Bram Stoker, and the gentleman who wrote Varney the Vampire, whose name I don't remember, but I'm actually recording Varney the Vampire as an audiobook, and I'm going to put it up on YouTube now, in case you guys want to listen to me tell dumb stories about vampires. I don't even want to get started on, like, examples of vampires in pop culture and, like, popular media, because this video will definitely have gone on long enough by now to have made most people, like, just click off and watch something else. So that'll actually probably be another mini video that I'll put up in the near future. 10 depictions of vampires in popular media or something like that. Look for that soon, whenever I get around to it. But all this talk of the undead sure has me hankering for some monsters that aren't reanimated corpses, you know? Like, they probably have nice, warm, actually flowing blood inside them. I don't know why I'm getting so excited about that. But I wonder what happens when a vampire drinks the blood of something that isn't human. And I mean, not like, you know, they take a cup of pig's blood or something like that, but I mean, like, what if a vampire bites, like, a mermaid or something like that? Aren't mermaids cool? Sea monsters and stuff like that. And I mean, not the, like, hanging out with a seagull, collecting forks, making a deal with a sea witch kind of mermaid. Those are boring. I'm talking about the, like, nasty, kills people for fun, drags people into the water, and then, like, bites them and eats them kind of mermaid, which we will talk about next time on this Monster Month version of Deity Salad. So thank you guys very much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you like it, the like and subscribe buttons are waiting just below this video to be drained of blood and have vampire blood spat into your mouth so that you become a vampire later. You can also follow my socials. That's the Facebook and Twitter that are in the description box. And if you feel like throwing some support my direction, you can come down to my apartment or anywhere nearby that I can get to you and offer me the opportunity to look at your neck, because I'm thirsty and I feel like that might be a way to for me to eliminate that thirst. Come down, let me look at your neck. Maybe just a little bite. Maybe just a little sip. Anyway, thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. God, this itches. Like a mosquito bite or something?